Hello everyone. I've decided to do this little baking and cooking how-to YouTube thing just to kind of keep my students entertained while we're on virtual learning platforms at school. I thought giving them the opportunity to try some of the recipes that I do might be kind of a fun thing and a break from the typical academics. So this is baking video number 1, and today we're going to try and make real authentic New York bagels. Now I do hope that Suleiman will please forgive me. I'm not trying to take away your bagel business. Your bagels here in Ghana are awesome. They're as good as New York bagels, but I just thought that people might like to try their hand at this, just in case there are times where they can't order from you. So I'm going to now flip the video and to the ingredients and show you what we're going to do. All right, so now I'm sharing with you the ingredients I'm going to use for making these New York style bagels. The very first thing I did was prep the flour. The ideal thing is to use bread flour, but what I chose to use this time was all-purpose unbleached flour, and you need 3.5 cups, and I've got that all ready to go in a bowl. I've also prepped in this little measuring cup 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. That's going to be really important in proofing the yeast. And I've done 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and that's going to get in with my flour mixture to help add a little bit of flavor to the bagels. And I have a bowl, I have the yeast here, which I'm going to be getting in just a moment. I have a bowl for allowing the dough to rise in a bit, and I will share with you what we do with that in just a little while. Now, I also have prepared 320 milliliters of water. Now, this water has to be the absolute right temperature. If it's too low, it will not activate the yeast. The yeast might wake up a little bit, but they won't start metabolizing, and so we won't get the carbon dioxide bubbles that we look for in proofing yeast. If it's too hot, then what will happen is the high temperatures will denature the enzymes in the yeast, and again, the yeast will become inactive. So we want our water temperature to be somewhere between 90 degrees and 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's going to be below, that's going to be somewhere between, I think 32 to like 38 centigrade. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 1.5 teaspoons of the yeast, and I'm going to add the 1.5 teaspoons, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm not going to do that. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of yeast to the water mixture, and then I'm going to add the sugar as a food source for the yeast so that they can proof. Okay, so I've gathered my 1 tablespoon of yeast out of the package. And now I'm going to add that to the water. And I have a spoon, and what I'm going to do is stir that a little bit. And then I'm also going to add the sugar to the water. And then this gets stirred to allow it to all start to activate. And we're going to actually, you can even see it starting to poof up. You can see bubbles starting to form, which shows that the yeast is becoming active, and we actually need to let this sit for about 10 minutes. I'm going to come back in about 5 minutes or so and stir it again, and then let it sit for an additional 5 minutes. Wow, look at that yeast proofing, or what they also call blooming. That's pretty incredible. That means our yeast is doing really well. So it's been just about 5 minutes. I'm going to give it another little stir. Wait 5 more minutes, and then we'll come back and take the next step. Okay, it's been just over 10 minutes. So again, now we're going to do the flour, and we're going to add to the 3.5 cups of flour our salt. Again, that's about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And I'm just going to go ahead, my hands are clean, and so I'm just going to go ahead and mix that with my hand. And then I'm going to add my yeast concoction. Look at how much that proofed. The yeast are really active. So now that's going to go into my mix. And then here, I'm just supposed to stir with my hand. I don't use a mixer, I don't use a whisk. And you can see here, it's still quite wet, but there's a lot of dry flour underneath. One of the things we don't want to work with is a very wet dough. We don't want it to be too dry either. There's still a lot of dry flour underneath, so I'm going to put down the video and finish this part, and I'll come back and show you the next part. Okay, so I've been working the dough in the bowl a bit, and I've gotten all of that loose flour. This still feels a touch sticky, but we'll see once we take it out. So now it's going to come out of the bowl and go onto a surface where I'm going to work it. And now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be kneading the flour. And kneading is where you're going to actually be pulling it in from the sides and pushing down to spread it out. Now my dough still feels very sticky, so one of the things I'm going to do is actually take a little more flour and I'm going to add a little bit of flour to reduce some of that stickiness. Now the kneading has got to take place for a good 10 minutes, and I'm not going to be able to hold onto my iPad to film this for 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the camera. I'm going to go ahead and knead, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, I'm back. It's been at least 10 minutes. My dough was really, really wet, and so what happened was I had to keep adding a little bit of flour and a little bit of flour to the dough to get it to be closer to the right consistency. One of the things you can see is that I'm now starting to shape this into a ball. My particular batch is still a little bit rougher than it should be. Probably because, again, I had a little bit too much fluid to the powder, but that actually is not going to matter too much in the end product. So what we're going to do now, this glass bowl is going to be really important. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to take my cooking spray, and I'm going to grease the bowl. And I'm going to grease it really, really well. And that's going to help prevent my dough from sticking to the sides of the bowl. And now I'm going to put my dough seam side down into the bowl. I'm also going to make sure that I get that grease all around on it. And I'm going to cover this with a wet towel, and I'm going to let this proof for 1 hour. What's going to happen is while I'm letting this proof, the yeast are still in there, they're still alive, they're still active, and so the yeast are going to be respiring. And one of the products of yeast respiration is carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide is going to create air bubbles, and that's going to cause this dough to rise. So I have my towel ready. The towel is a damp towel. There's two reasons for the damp towel. One is that it will prevent the bread dough from drying out while it's sitting there proofing. And then the other reason is it also helps to reduce a little bit of the stickiness as that dough rises and actually hits the fabric on the bread. So now I'm just going to cover this up, and this is going to sit for the next hour. doing some dishes while I'm waiting for my dough to proof. The little plate that's in there was not from the bagel making, that was leftover from my lunch. Okay, the dishes from the bagel prep are done, cleaned, and in the dish racks to dry. If you're wondering about all of those plastic containers, I've kept those from lots of past food deliveries, and I actually use them to feed the street cats here in our complex. We've got 14 street cats total, and so I feed them once a day, and the property owner feeds them once a day also. And since I still have quite a while before my dough is ready, I think I'm going to go either play with my dogs or play with the street cats now. Okay, it's been about the damp cloth, and you can see that the dough got a little bit bigger. It did grow, maybe not quite twice the size, but it's still nice and big. Now, the best part is that we get to punch the dough right now in order to flatten it. So when I say punch the dough, I mean punch the dough. So we want to decrease it a little bit. And next, what we're going to do is take it out of the bowl, and we're going to put it onto a floured surface. Going to need that cloth again in a little bit. And now we empty this out. You see how nicely that came out because it was not, or because it was oiled and it didn't stick to the bowl. So now one of the things we're going to do is cut the dough in half. And then we cut each one of these into fourths because I'm going to make 8 separate balls. Okay, I've cut these into 8 separate parts. So now I'm going to take one of these, and on a floured surface, I'm going to do what I did earlier with my big dough ball, and I'm going to fold the bottom kind of in on itself to create a round shape. And then right here on the floured surface, I'm going to just roll it. We want that seam to be gone. And so we're going to keep rolling this until I get a nice round shape. Okay, see that the seam is disappearing. And now I'm going to go ahead and do that with the other 7 pieces of dough. Okay, you can see I've got my 8 dough balls. I'm not very good at doing equal size ones, but now I'm going to take the damp cloth again, and I'm going to cover the dough balls. And these are going to sit and be allowed to rise for 10 minutes again. All right, once these have risen, we're going to make the holes in them. And then this is the key to doing real New York style bagels. Before you bake them, you must boil them. So while I'm preparing or letting the dough rise, I'm getting my pot of water boiling. Okay, we've been letting the dough rise for about another 10 minutes. So now we're going to put the hole into the bagels. So now I'm going to take one of the bagels, and I'm going to make sure that my thumb and my finger have flour on them. And then I'm going to start pressing down the center of the bagel. And I'm just going to create a hole through there. And then I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to enlarge that hole. And you're going to try and make a nice bagel size hole, maybe about 2.5 centimeters in depth. All right, and then you go on to the next one and do the same thing. Make sure you have enough flour on your thumb and finger as you press in and start to create that hole. And then you start to try to enlarge the hole. And you do this with all 8. Okay, we've got our bagels with our holes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bagels and I'm going to boil them on each side for about 1 minute. So I've got my water already boiling. And I'm going to get a little assistance to add my bagel. There's 1. There's 2. And I'm only going to do 3 at a time because my pot is not very big. 3, actually I could probably fit a 4th small one in because you don't want to stack these on top of each other. You want them to each have their own space for boiling. So I'm going to let them boil on each side for a minute, and then I'm going to flip them over. Well, sorry, I'm going to let them boil on this side for a minute, then I'm going to flip them over, and then I'm going to drain them, and then they're going to go on a greased cookie sheet. And so I'll share with you what happens next. Here are some of the boiling bagels on the second side. Here are bagels that are on the tray. Okay, my bagels are not quite ready to go in the oven yet. So they've been boiled and drained, and now I want to add poppy seeds to them. But in order to be able to add the poppy seeds to them, I have to do an egg wash. So I'm going to take my egg mixture and I'm going to coat my bagels with the egg mixture. What the egg mixture is going to do is it's going to create a nice little glaze on my bagel, but it's also going to provide a medium for my poppy seeds to stick to. If I just put the poppy seeds on these right before I put them in the oven without the egg glaze, the poppy seeds would not stick to the bagels. Okay, now I am a fan of poppy seeds, so I'm going to be putting a lot on. And as I said, I like a lot of poppy seeds, but not all of these will remain on the bagels by the time they come out of the oven. So now the instructions for this particular batch of bagels is supposed to be to cook them at 425 degrees and I've forgotten how many minutes now. I have to take a look at that again. My oven doesn't have a degree measure, and I'm just gonna have to wing it and play it by ear. I'm gonna have to just keep an eye on what's happening and how they're baking. So these are gonna go into the oven now. I'm going to lower the top burner. Oh, wrong one. Lower the top burner so they don't cook too fast from the top up. And we'll see in a little while how they turn out.